Welcome to the A Minute to Midnight show, folks. This is Tony coming to you from New Zealand. Certainly crazy times we're experiencing in the world at the moment. So much happening, so much to cover. Today on the show I have Lynette Zang. I want to welcome Lynette Zang back to the A Minute to Midnight show. Lynette's been on the show a few times. It's been a little while now. I think right at the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak was sort of, we covered things a bit. So lots happened since then. So welcome, Lynette.
Oh, I'm glad to be back. And yeah, a lot has happened since then.
Yes, it sure has. Just very quickly, firstly, what's the stock market? You know, I've been watching that going up and up and up. Though the last 2 days I see it's been going down again, but it's like totally disconnected from almost from everything else that seems to be happening. What's going on there?
Right. Well, there are two key things that are happening. Number one is the Federal Reserve just creating an unlimited amount of new money. And so certainly when they create that money, it must go someplace. And it's going into the markets because we've been trained to think if the markets are going up, everything must be okay. But there's another phenomenon, because really we've been dealing with that particular issue since 2008. But here's the new thing. That is, people, and I've heard reports of millennials, but I think it's also a lot of people that are stuck at home, have opened new accounts at places like Charles Schwab and Fidelity and E-Trade, etc. Once they went to zero fees on those trades, and they can also buy fractional shares, which are shares less than one. So I think the number is 40% of all of the new trades at Fidelity are done in dollar amounts rather than in number of shares. So you can go in with, I've seen ads, you can go in with as little as $5. They're talking about you can put $5 in and buy 10 stocks. So what you have is something very similar to what happened in 1928 when the naive public, after watching the markets go up and up and up, they started to participate. The insiders sold to them, and that was back when they were trying to create this consumer-driven economy, and they suddenly made credit cheap and available to the masses. So I think what we're seeing right now in those different brokerage firms, including Robinhood, et cetera, they've made it cheap and easy for people to trade. I can't, it's hard for me to call it investing. So there's this, and we just gave, this country, we just sent out those $1,200 checks, which most people are not actually spending, but a lot of them could be using it to trade, thinking that, hey, I want to participate in this market that's just going up. So pretty interesting phenomenons that are happening for sure.
Yeah, it seems like a distraction in a way for everything else that's really going on.
Well, can you tell me how much a stock is worth?
Well, it depends on what stocks they are, I suppose, but I wouldn't touch them.
I mean, the valuation is supposed to be based upon, the earnings of the company. But who in the world knows what that's going to be yet? Now, companies in New Zealand are going to have a better handle on that because you have done a phenomenal job in suppressing the COVID virus. And so you're reopening and hopefully there won't be a spike. In this country, we're starting to reopen, and Arizona, which is where I live, is one of the states that is experiencing a spike in COVID cases. And I can tell you personally, I'm not rushing out of the house to resume my old life.
Well, in New Zealand, Yeah, in New Zealand, we've now got no COVID-19 cases at all. The last one recovered. Supposedly, we've had no new ones for quite an extended time. So everything here within the country as of a few days ago is now pretty much back to normal. We've got no social distancing requirements, no crowd control requirements, none of that. The only thing we do have is rigorous border controls, which are
Right.
extremely frustrating, I will be honest, from my perspective, that you cannot get in or out of the country with very few exceptions. Unless, of course, you happen to have lots of money and be in the film industry, in which case you basically buy your way into New Zealand. Like a whole crew for Avatar, the Avatar movie, has been allowed into New Zealand. They have to quarantine for 2 weeks, but they've been allowed to come here to start shooting a movie, while people can't even get their partners into the country and everything else. But of course, it's money talking, that they've been allowed to do that. But so that's life here. But there's a lot of people unemployed. Tourism in New Zealand is a huge earner. Of course, that's gone flopped down because there's no international people coming into the country at all. It is kind of pretty frustrating. But we don't have any coronavirus in the country, but all in all, things are not looking good. And if you've got spikes in coronavirus, I mean, yeah, are they going to end up with lockdowns and all of that again? So why on earth the stock market's raging upwards? It seems bizarre.
Well, only if you're in the assumption that we actually have free markets. We don't have free markets. In 2008, the Federal Reserve came in and decided that they were going to manage the markets. And they're going to, and now it's unlimited at all cost. So they're just announced, I mean, they've got this whole alphabet soup. And since it worked so well, pumping all of this money for free into the economy since 2008 worked so well, I'm being completely facetious. We were already headed into a global slowdown going into this. But now they're pointing the finger at the COVID virus and using that to justify not just pulling out the old program, I can't say the old program, the experimental programs from 2008 that clearly did not work, but they've added to that and they've come up with a whole bunch of new programs. Did it really help everything they did in 2008? Of course it didn't. So now they're just doing it a whole lot bigger. I mean, when you look at the balance sheet, quite frankly, what they've done in these last few weeks dwarfs what they did during the crisis in 2008. It's illogical. It didn't work in 2008. It's not going to work now, but it will push the markets up. And it's all on a sea of debt. The Federal Reserve lends, the government spends. And frankly, Tony, that's another piece. Any kind of semblance of the independence of the Federal Reserve is gone. It's gone. Now you've got fiscal and monetary policies coming together and working together. And today, when Jerome Powell came out, when he said that he's not even thinking about raising rates, which seemed to surprise a lot of people. But welcome to Japan. Oh, no, this is America. Yield curve control, which didn't work in Japan either. I mean, they still had another inversion even with that yield curve control, which means that they will buy as many bonds as they need to keep rates within the range that they desire. But even Japan's been doing that for a long time. I mean, they did it first starting in the 90s and then this whole alphabet soup. And look at how great their economy is doing. They own most of the stock market. And here, hey, we're buying junk bonds. We're buying everything. We're loaning money to everybody. Well, you can only create the semblance of prosperity on debt. But at some point, that debt has to be serviced, rolled over, or defaulted on. And you can create all these zombie companies. That's another import from Japan. And there are a lot of zombie companies, which are companies that for at least 3 years have not been able to pay their interest, let alone any principal, out of their earnings. So what, we're going to end up with a world of corporate zombies, and that's going to make everything great? Don't think so.
No. Okay, so I think there's a bigger picture going on here, and that is
Yes.
the Great Reset. We've had Klaus Schwab who's the founder of the World Economic Forum, coming out with an article entitled The Great Reset and pushing forward a case how with the COVID-19, this is a perfect opportunity with a small window of opportunity to reset everything. Then you've had, I think, the IMF coming out with similar types of things. So really, this is the game that they're playing, I think. What is a Great Reset going to look like, do you think?
Well, it won't be good for most people, and we're really already in the middle of it. Look at the level of unemployment, and even in New Zealand, that has no more cases of COVID. But what's the unemployment like there? So they are using this as a cover because they could not have gotten away with another 2008. So what's it going to look like? Well, if they can, and I think they got a shot, they're going to take us into a purely digital economy, and therefore that will give them a lot more control. Plus, let's face it, we've been moving toward a surveillance economy anyway, and the tech companies are just a lot more powerful, and the governments have kind of backed off from a lot of the regulations that they were starting to put in place. So I don't think it's going to be pretty for most people, to be perfectly honest with you.
No, I don't think so at all. I'm not liking or anything of what I'm seeing at the moment, and I certainly don't trust people like Klaus Schwab at all. But I think they've made it pretty clear what their goal is, and I just, forgive me for being cynical here, but I don't think what's happened is an accident with coronavirus and all of those things. This is, they're talking about a short window of opportunity to bring in what they've wanted to bring in anyway. So, I see us moving into that.
Well, I can't 100% prove, or would I say that this was necessarily a planned event? But if you actually go to the Wuhan Labs website, which I did, and if you actually read a lot of the documents that they wrote, they've known about this for a very long time. And they were the scientists from all around the world, not just China, but including the US and government agencies in the US that were supporting this research on a superbug. And so they've written, they even showed through their own flow charts how it would transmit from animals to humans and then from humans to humans. And so I find it really interesting that they were creating this superbug. They were doing all of this research for many, many years, but at the same time, they never looked at how to create some kind of medicine or antidote for it. And they just started that once it was actually released, when they knew, look at the documents, read it, they knew it was going to get out to the public. And that bothers me so much. And I wish I didn't feel that way, how I feel about it, but I'm reading the documents and I believe my research because, when it's in black and white from the devil's mouth, where you're going to go, oh no, they didn't really mean it like that, and then so on top of that, because really I know in this country and actually I think around the world, they're pointing fingers, but they're pointing it at the coronavirus rather than at the full cause. But there's something that I find really interesting. Initially, the coronavirus pandemic squelched protests globally. and it enabled windows of opportunity for places like Hong Kong and for India, and even for some corporations here in the US to take advantage and suppress the people more, etc. But now it also created a tinderbox. And so the protests over what happened with Floyd George and police brutality, and it isn't just about, I think everybody, the reason why the whole world is jumping on board is because it isn't, all lives matter. All lives matter. And so people of all colors and races, etc., and yes, definitely some more than others, but they've been feeling really downtrodden and suppressed. And so all we needed was a Floyd to come out and light a fire to that tinderbox. And I don't know if they're going to so easily put it back in the bag, but an outbreak, we don't know the outcome from all of the protests on the outbreak either. It's really interesting to see what we do live in the most interesting time, definitely.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And yes, it could be a spike of more of the coronavirus from the protests. Plus, of course, you've had all the looting and burning down of stores which now don't exist. And more often than not, I think it's been outsiders bust in who do that type of thing. And so it's not their community where they live that's being destroyed and all of these things. But the elites will use this to forward their agenda, which is pushing us into their new system. All of this. I just don't think it's an accident. And I mean, I won't go into too much. Really, this is planned, what's going on. And the thing is, it is happening and they are moving us into that. The other thing I noticed, you were mentioning digital currency. There was an article in Forbes the other day. Could China could force Donald Trump and the Fed to destroy the US banking system? China is poised to launch a digital version of its yuan and could be about to create serious problems for the US banking system, potentially forcing the US to digitize the dollar to compete. Now, the Federal Reserve has warned central bank digital currencies might one day replace commercial banks, creating a deposit monopolist and playing havoc with the banking system. The introduction of digital currencies may justify a fundamental shift in the architecture of a financial system, a central bank open to all. Federal Reserve of Philadelphia researchers wrote in a 32 paper titled Central Bank Digital Currency, Central Banking for All. So really this is it, digital currency run by a central bank or central banks.
Yes, and let's take that one step further because we've talked about this before, and the IMF particularly has talked about, there's wholesale and there's retail. So wholesale SDRs, which is the IMF's fiat currency, that goes to the banks and it goes to the countries. But the retail would go to the normal people, you and me. And when you look at what the advantage would be for central banks, aside from the fact that it's full control, is also that when they institute policy, right now it takes 18 months to go through the system to see if they got the impact that they wanted. But once once the currency is fully digitized, then if they want you to spend money, all they have to do is take you into deeply more negative rates so that you can watch your savings evaporate. And if you do, what are you most likely to do? Go out and spend it. Right? Before you watch it evaporate, let's buy something that at least has a shot of holding its value better than the currency. And for governments, they say this. It gives them the ability to do lifetime taxes. So, hey, you have a bad year this year. Oh, well, too bad. But you had a great year last year. And we can just go into the account and take it. If you look at China, when they want to fine you or fee you, if you jaywalk, by the time you get to the other side of the street, the fee is out of your account. So it's just a whole lot more convenient, and it gives them a whole lot more control. And they've actually been talking about this for a number of years. And so I'm going to say that what my personal battle is if we can get at least 3% of the population to understand that this is the way that they are moving, nudging us, then we have a shot at them not fully getting away with it. Because frankly, they're the ones that caused this to begin with. And that wealth division and all of this. So I don't want them to remain in control. If I can do anything about that, I'm going to.
That's exactly what they're doing. They're saying, we're, in a sense, we are the elites. Yep, we've controlled the system before. The system now doesn't work anymore, but we want a new system with us still in control of it. That's what they're doing. The same people trying to keep control in a different manner, and only this time with far greater control. So
Yes.
I'm looking, obviously precious metals seems to be a place to put, money because it's not part of that system. But then on the other hand, what about the threat of confiscation? So is that even safe?
Well, look, desperate central bankers will do anything. Having said that, when you look at history, I think what really matters is the type of metal that you buy. Are you positioned into the common man's metal? And I'm not talking the difference between gold or silver, but I'm talking about what's most easily available, what's sitting in most of the retirement accounts, which is bullion, which is new gold, new silver. I'm not as worried about a confiscation of silver because they don't reset the currencies against that. It's the secondary metal. So I'm really referring more toward bullion. And bullion runs with the spot market. So it's very easy to control that because the spot market's just a contract. On the other side of it, and this is why I personally, this has not always been true, but it's 100% true now. Personally, I don't own any gold bullion. I own collectible coins because it is much harder for them. They can manipulate how you think, but it's much harder for them to confiscate that. Primarily because some of those collectible coins go for many millions of dollars for an ounce or a fractional ounce of gold. And like there's a coin that's coming to auction right now, which is the very first US coin ever documented. And they anticipate that this coin will generate about 15 million in sales for just that one coin. Well, let's see. Who can afford $15 million for 1 ounce of gold? I'm thinking it's either those that write the laws or they would have the ability to influence those that write the laws. So while I'm not telling that, I don't personally own a coin 1 ounce of gold at $15 million, although I do have some very low pop rare coins. But I just want to be in that same category. And you can do it with a very low premiums. Yeah, the premiums have grown a bit since we've gone into this run for gold, but they're still near the lows that I've ever seen them. And that's where I feel more comfortable because I want to be in that category. Kind of like if I had the ability to buy health insurance or the retirement of the federal government or the Congress in this country. They don't have Social Security. Everybody else has Social Security. I have Social Security. Am I going to collect on it? Well, maybe I will, maybe I won't. But even if I do, what are those dollars going to buy me? Nothing, right? So if I could pay a little premium and have the programs that the guys in control create for themselves, I'm going to do that. And that's what they've done with the collectible coins in 33. And, if there is indeed another overt confiscation, which I personally think is going to happen, well, I'm willing to pay that little wealth insurance to have a much better shot at holding on to my gold.
And what about
and being
silver?
able to use it.
And what about silver? I mean, the difference between silver and gold is still, well, I don't know exactly. It must be getting on to 100 to 1 or something, crazy out of whack. So what's going to happen with silver?
Well, silver, because it gets used up in industry and it's more used in industry, it's a lot more volatile than gold, but it is still the secondary monetary metal. So really, for those, I own both. For me, silver is about barterability day to day, my ability to go in and put a tank of gas in my car, or if I have to go to the grocery store, which I don't because I have my garden. So, that's one thing that got tested in this whole piece that makes me feel really good. But silver is the secondary monetary metal. And yes, that silver gold ratio is going to collapse. I don't know that it will go down to where, the 15 to 1 or 16 to 1 ratio, but silver's been rising faster than gold. Gold's been rising too. So that silver gold ratio has been more normal. It's still completely out of whack. But personally, I don't really care so much about that because I don't intend to convert my silver or my gold into dollars unless I'm going to use it to convert into some income producing asset or, oh, dare I say it, pay off my mortgage and that kind of thing. So, you definitely need both. But for me, I'm not as worried about an overt confiscation of silver, even though they did do that in 33 as well. But it gets used up and it's more industrial. So, yeah, you've got to have both out of the system. Absolutely.
So what about people that have got money in 401ks and things like that still? What would you be telling those people?
Well, okay, first of all, they've changed some of the rules, making it much easier to take distributions from your 401ks, your IRAs. They've eliminated a lot of the penalties and things like that. So everybody's got to do what they're comfortable doing. I can talk for myself, which was I took my distribution and I paid my taxes on it. I still have a retirement plan, but it is in gold in my possession. So that's where I'm most comfortable. I would say if it were me, then I would get as much out of that as I could, convert it into the physical metals like I did, and hold it, because if you don't hold it, you don't own it. And for whatever you have to leave in there, what the gold will do is protect that so that when that goes away or down, this is rising. And it's not rising because I want it to rise or you want it to rise. It's rising in terms of fiat because that's how they do the reset. The ultimate reset, they reset against gold. And gold will become a portion of the new currency, whether that's a central bank digital currency, because I think we'll probably end up with a local currency. So in the US, a digital dollar, you too, in New Zealand, a digital dollar, as well as a more global currency, the IMF SDR. I think we'll have both. But yeah. And if you, and I'll tell you this too, originally when I created the plan, the strategy for myself, which everybody at ITM is familiar with, well, I originally thought that I would convert a lot more of my gold holdings into the new currency until I saw the direction that they were taking us, which is purely, if they have their druthers, it will be purely intangible. It will be purely digital. And so I've modified my strategy to account for that, and I will convert it more as I need it than doing a chunk of it. Even though they'll most likely, and the IMF has certainly talked about this, put a component of gold as part of the new digital currency because they're going to have to get people to have confidence in it again and be willing to use it.
Yeah, well, I mean, if they set a new currency, then they're going to have something to base it on, because there's no point to just converting the current currency over straight to another one, because you still got all the debts and all of those things. So, I mean, I think there's going to be some massive upheaval with
Oh,
all of this.
well, yeah. And I mean, part of the reset is to hyperinflate or even hyper deflate, doesn't matter. It's really basically the same thing. All of those debts away, default on all of those debts. Because you're right, they can't take it into the new system. And it'll be interesting to see because the digital dollars, they could be based upon transactions. I mean, the whole world has been pushing for a consumer based economy. The US started that in the 20s, but China started it a few years ago, a number of years ago now. But, yeah, they want us to consume. So, what if money is going to be created by consumption?
Well, the other side of this is the elites are not going to want Joe Blogs to have the same amount of the digital currency that they have. I mean, so they're still going to have some way of dishing it out so that they who are at the top are still at the top and still have the most wealth. And then that brings me to the universal basic income, and that
Yeah.
seems to be another thing that's being pushed forward. How do you think this will work?
Well, I personally believe that there will be some form of universal basic income by the end of this year in this country, at any rate, and probably globally, because such high unemployment. I mean, how can consumers spend if they can't take on more debt or they don't have income? I mean, those are basically the two ways that they can consume. So, yeah, I don't see any way around that. And there's a lot of talk about it. So I think we'll see it before the end of this year.
That is interesting. So, are they going to be printing more money and giving away more helicopter money between now and the end of the year?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There isn't even one little teeny weeny doubt in my mind about that. Absolutely. We will most likely see an extension to the unemployment. I mean, the US is doing it a little bit differently than Europe, but Europe has been subsidizing employees to these companies. Are these companies going to want to take these employees back on their payroll? Yeah, that's going to be pretty hard for the government to or the central bank to back out of. Once you put things in, I mean, they have a tendency to stay there. And in this country, so we gave people on unemployment an extra $600 a week. But when they did the studies, I think it's something, don't hold me to this, but I think I'll be pretty close. 70% of the people that are collecting unemployment are collecting more on unemployment than they actually got paid. And so these people don't really, now that the states are starting to open up, it's really interesting. Now that the states are starting to open up again, a lot of these people don't want to go back to work because they will make less money. I think a lot of them are the ones that are now playing in the stock market, right?
Yeah.
And buying the fractional shares with this, kind of found money addition. Now that is supposed to end the end of July, but I don't think that it will. I think that they're going to extend it. They might reduce it. They're also talking about paying people a $400 weekly bonus for going back to work. So I don't know, kind of sounds a little bit like UBI to me. And they're also talking about giving everybody, $2,000. So a family of four now has a basic income of $8,000 a month. I mean, yeah, it's very interesting, but yeah,
So they could have a
UBI for all.
basic income of $8,000 a month. Meanwhile, the loaf of bread might be doubling or tripling or everything else.
Or quadrupling, or yeah. What people don't really realize typically is that, but I think everybody needs to think about it for themselves. When something is cheap and easy, it has less value than something that you've really had to work for that really matters. And I always use the example of strawberries because I can go to the market and buy a pint of strawberries for a couple of bucks, 2, $3, something like that. But the strawberries that I grow take a lot of time and water and love and effort. So I buy a pint of strawberries at the grocery store and I want to make a smoothie. Oh, heck, I'll dump the whole pint in because it was easy. But when I pull a strawberry out of my garden, I'm going to tell you right now, one teeny little nibble at a time, and I savor it and I enjoy it because that took a whole lot more effort and time and love. Well, frankly, fiat money is no different. If you're given that fiat money, how much value does it really have? You'll go out and spend it pretty easy. If you have to really work hard for that money, it has a lot more value to you, though for the government and the central banks, through inflation, which is baked into the system, you just work for less and less and less and less. And corporate profits go up and up and up and up because how do we judge inflation? By the goods and services that are created. So that is also what's added a lot, thanks to the central banks, to wealth inequality globally, not just in this country, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was interesting you mentioned the gardening. I think that's actually something really good that people can do if they have any way of doing it at all, is to start looking at what you can grow for yourself. I know that's something I look at, and the fruit, and I know exactly what you mean about the growing the strawberries and you savor them. And it's always like, oh, yay, my strawberries are out. It's the wrong time of year for all that, for me, because not much is growing at the moment. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about for that. So yeah, I would definitely encourage people to try and look to grow some stuff for themselves. Well, what are some other things that you would, in a nutshell, just saying for people to do now with what's going on?
Well, I feel like we're in the eye of the storm, right? So everybody was panicking and everybody was, you know, I think that everybody needs to look at where the holes were, what created the challenges for them, whether it was toilet paper or whether it was savings. And for me, savings is not in terms of dollars, savings is in terms of gold and silver, something that can bail you out. You become your own central banker. So, what I would really encourage people to do, I feel like we're in the eye of the storm, and during this calm, fill in those holes: food, water, energy, security, community, shelter, barterability, wealth preservation. Get it done. Because even if you live in a little tiny apartment and you don't have any room in your apartment for, a grow shelf, which can be any size really, but even if you don't want to do that, you can have sprouting seeds like broccoli or clover, something like that. Takes up very little space, and you rinse it off for a few days and boom, you have living healthy food.
Yep,
Fill in those holes.
Yeah, sprouting is an excellent one. So I just got one last question then, which I know I get asked sometimes. People would say, but if you've got precious metals, how do you convert it? I mean, what use is it going to be in a collapsing economy or whatever to have all of that? What do you do with it? Are people going to be able to convert it?
Well, 6,000 years of history tells us that yes, you are going to be able to convert it because it is used across both silver and gold, across every single aspect of the global economy. So there is always a market for it. Sometimes maybe less, sometimes maybe more. But with fiat money like dollars, whether they're New Zealand dollars or US dollars, when the hyperinflation starts, that really that demand collapses. They only have use in one area. So saying that there would not be any demand to it would go against the historic norm, because you have always, every single time, been able to convert your gold into, or silver, and silver, either way, into any currency, any good, or any service. So yes, you can't eat them, but you can't eat dollars either. You can always convert them. You can't always convert dollars.
Yeah, you won't be able to easily buy the silver or gold with your dollars at some point, but you'll be able to convert them the other way around, your silver and gold into whatever the digital currency is. Okay, so yeah, that's a great point. So where can people find you online, and just quickly give them a bit of a rundown of what you do and how they find you?
Well, at ITM Trading, we are a full service physical gold and silver dealer. So everything that we do is with the physical metal itself. But what really makes us different is that we have a strategy. And yes, it does use gold and silver because that's money that has withstood the test of time. And it's based upon those repeatable patterns. So you can search ITM Trading. You can search me, Lynette Zang. We have a YouTube channel that is purely about education, and we post things like this will be available. The link will be available. And then I do Q&A, and I do research reports and deep dives at least 3 times a week. So we're pretty out there. You can find us. Either ITM Trading or Lynette Zang will get you to us.
Well, that's great. And I just want to thank you for being on the show again today. We've kind of covered a lot of different things, as we usually do when I ask you all kinds of different things and give people a quick overview of stuff. But yeah, I want to thank you again for being on the show, and hopefully
my pleasure.
We'll have you back again soon, because I think I always learn a lot, and so do our listeners.
Well, I appreciate you having me back on, because really, we're all part of the same community, and we really all are all about education, because that's where we get our power from. That and coming together. That's where we get our power from. And I think, as bleak as things may look for some, I see a silver lining, a gold lining, if you will, because I can also see us coming together as as a bigger community on a global basis, for whatever reason. So I think we have a chance of having a more fair system on the other side of this, if we can come together and demand it.
Okay, well, thanks. Yeah, thanks again. It's been a great discussion, Lynette.
Always.
Folks, make sure to visit and also bookmark our website, aminutetomidnight.com. In fact, sign up for email updates, and you can even join the website for the forum too if you want. All of our shows are found on the website, aminutetomidnight.com, as well as on iTunes and on YouTube. And A Minute to Midnight is run 100% by donations. Greatly appreciate people that help us to keep this running. If you're able to donate, that's awesome. So I want to say thank you to the people that help us. Couldn't do it without your help. And the music used in the shows I've written, played and recorded, and you can download some free music on the website as well. So visit aminutetomidnight.com, give us a thumbs up on YouTube if you're watching it there, and subscribe to our YouTube's channel and iTunes channel as well. That's it. God bless. This is Tony signing out and saying hopefully have a great and safe week, and we'll be back soon, God willing, with another show.